else? Cool. So yeah, thanks for coming back for those of you who were here yesterday, and for those who weren't, welcome. Today we'll be going through a relatively intermediate Excel workshop that will hopefully assist you guys with the rest of your degrees and hopefully your careers in the future. So I'm Martin. I'm a PhD candidate with the School of Engineering, and I've been running these workshops for about 2 or so years now, after pitching the idea to Simon a couple of years back when I noticed that a lot of students struggled with how to use Excel, particularly during their thesis. Um, so I run 2 of these workshops during Employability Week, and this is the second one. And hopefully this will help you guys out to develop those skills a bit better and get you exploring Excel a little bit more. So just a quick housekeeping thing. So if the screen appears to be too small or it's not visible, you can enlarge the screen by going to that top left corner and then zooming in if that's an issue. So then you can follow along. So our session today will feature an introduction to Excel. So I won't cover that into too much depth because we come into this session assuming that you have at least some fundamental knowledge of Excel. But we will do a quick run through of each of the Excel tabs. And there's a reason for that because there's something that I've noticed a lot of people, even those who are more advanced Excel users, don't know. So I do want to at least highlight those things. And then we'll do some introduction to useful Excel functions. So yesterday we covered more basic ones like summation, averaging, basic math ones. Today we're going to get into a bit more complicated ones. So things like VLOOKUP, if and statements, or statements, and so on. Then we'll have an example problem to work through. And finally, we'll have our session summary and close, which will give you guys the chance to ask any questions that you might have. So just a note, this session is being recorded, and that's for anyone who's late or anyone who thinks they've missed something or would like to revise it afterwards. You'll have that opportunity to do so at the end of this session because we'll email that out. So you'll notice that I have Mackenzie with me. She'll be going around and asking you for your student numbers if you don't have it in your name, just so that we can make sure that the recording is actually emailed out to everyone. So please provide that to her if you haven't already, and that would be very helpful. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is just share my screen, and we're going to go through Excel. So what I would recommend is, as we're doing the example problem that we'll do later, I would suggest that you work through it with me while we're doing it, because then you can see how it works and what's the best practice or what you need to fix or look into. So hopefully you are all pretty familiar with this. This is our general Excel screen. This is all our workbook that we do our calculations and our data analysis on. In terms of the tabs, most of this first part here is pretty similar to Microsoft Word. We've got a couple extra things here to do with percentage conversion, accountancy, and number formatting. And we've got conditional formatting, which is pretty useful if we're trying to look at patterns and things in different data sets and to highlight outliers or to see which values might stand out in a group set. Then we've got some row inserts, so that's typical for most Microsoft programs. Sort and filter, so that's very useful if you've got data and you want to sort in ascending or descending order, or you want to filter specific data based on different criteria. And then analyzing data, which we won't touch on too much today, but that is also quite useful. In our insert tab, relatively similar again to other Microsoft programs, we've got pivot tables, which are a specific type of table that Excel uses for data analysis, typical smart art and shapes. Then here we go to our charts. So hopefully you are all relatively familiar with how to do charts by now. That's the assumed knowledge. And then we've got normal revisions, add comments, add texts, and so on. In page layout, this is all very standard. The only thing in this tab that I would recommend or at least bring your attention towards is this print view. So if in the event that you want to print the Excel document you're working on, you can click on this print grid lines, and it'll actually show you up to what tab has that printing range, so you get what a full page is actually worth. I don't use it too much, it's actually quite rare, but I thought I'd bring your attention to it in the off chance that you do need it. Formulas, again, pretty self-explanatory. We have our formulas that we use to analyze and work with our data. So you can go through and have a look at all the different types of formulas. I will not do that today. That was part of the introductory workshop yesterday, and most of the time I will use formulas based on what I write in the workbook. So I won't actually click on these books to obtain formulas. I'll just write it in the sheet here. So equals sum, for example. And then I'll highlight cells. So wrong one, and so on. So I won't be going through each of those. That I'll leave up to your discretion to have a look at and see and play around with. Data, again, we won't go into this too much today, but I did want to bring this to your attention in terms of importing data and how to get data into your Excel, particularly from CSV files or text files. So we've got these buttons here that you can use. And we've got different analysis tools that you can use as well to predict or forecast different things. Review, this is pretty much exactly the same as other Microsoft programs. The only thing is you can protect sheets or protect workbooks or allow edit ranges. So that's just if you're sending files to different people that you may not want access to everything. So just bear in mind that that's available. And this is the main one I wanted to draw your attention to because this is something that even advanced users don't always know. And that's the freeze panes option. And the reason for that is because it's actually quite useful if you have huge data sets. So I'll give you an example. If I, for example, right here, title 1, and I'm going to drag that all the way across. So we've got 70 and then data set 1. And this is going to be also our titles going down. And we've got it to 50. Now I'm just going to do for the rest of them a random number. Let's do it between 0 and 100 because I'm just going to make a data set. So I'm going to put that all the way down and then I'm going to go across. And we'll just put random numbers all the way across. Okay, and now just to avoid lag, I'm just going to copy paste this all as values. Okay, so we've got our data set, our make-believe data set. So not really important what it is. This is just to highlight what I'm trying to show here. So if, for example, we are working and we're trying to find a value and we want to find a data point for title 30, data set 35, I would go to here, title 30, but if I look now, I don't know where my title 25 is. It's missing because it doesn't show there. So Excel has a very useful feature where if I click on this column, so to the rightmost column, the first right column from that title set and the column and the row below, if I press this freeze panes option, what it does is it'll freeze everything above and to the left of the cell you've selected. So now if I want that title 30, I can go to title 30 and I can scroll all the way down to data set 25 and I can see which point it is. So I know that that's that one there. So it's very easy to find because I've kept the title frozen as part of the freeze pane. So now I can move all the way across, all the way down, and those panes are always going to be frozen. So that's just a little, I guess, quality of life tip that not everyone knows about, but it's very, very useful for bigger data sets in particular. So I did just want to bring your attention to that in case you didn't know what that was. So hopefully that makes sense. Yep, so that's pretty much our general introduction into Excel for those of you who maybe have forgotten or needed a quick refresher. So what we're actually going to do today, though, is explore a few specific functions, and that's the if, and, or, and VLOOKUP functions. And And the reason for this is these are relatively simple, but they're very powerful tools in terms of data analysis and validation. So they're very useful in identifying trends and patterns and to create your own criteria for different aspects of Excel. So I'll go through each of these very quickly and what they are, and then we'll have an example which I'll give a link out so you can follow and work along with as well. So our if statements, for anyone who's familiar with programming in any degree, an if statement is essentially telling me or telling the program that if some condition is met, then give me this output, and if it's not met, give me this other output. So for example, I'll use one that I showed yesterday. If I've got a number scale, so from 1 to 22, if I for some reason wanted to know, um, you know, numbers which are greater than 6, and I have this full data set, it might not always be in order, it might be a random array. What you can do is use an if statement to determine it. So here I'll go equals if, and then it shows you. So the first thing it's telling me is logical test. So it wants me to input a logical test. So in this case, we said we're trying to find numbers greater than 6. So if that row is greater than 6, I want it to tell me greater than 6. And if it's not greater than 6, I want Excel to tell me less than 6. And then we'll press enter. So here we can see 1 is obviously less than 6, therefore it gives me that result. So now we will go double click and it'll tell us everything. Now, the only caveat here is with this 6 one, because I've only inputted it 2 conditions saying greater than 6, less than 6, but the condition is if it's greater than 6, then put it. It is still put here that it was less than 6. So in this case here, you can start to use different functions. So here we could embed an or statement if we wanted to. And we could say if or it's greater than or less than 6, we could say greater than less than 6. So you can embed. So let's change this a little bit and let's add an or statement here. So I'll write it on this one here because we want to try and get this a little bit more accurate. So let's put here equal if, and then what I'm going to do is put an or test, because what I want is 2 arguments. I want if either it's less than 6 or it's equal to 6, because then I want it to tell me something. So equal or, and then you see here, we're kind of starting this nested function. So we're trying to get something embedded within it. So now it says here, instead of having the logical answer, if true, answer it's false, the first thing is we have to do is solve or find the objective for this or statement. So all we do here is just list what are our logicals that could be completed, so one or the other. So in this case, we need this cell has to be less than 6. That's one of them. We'll put a comma. Or this cell is equal to 6. Then we can close it. So that's our logic test. Those are the ones. So if it is less than 6 or equal to 6, those are our 2 conditions. So now, if one of those conditions is true, what do we want it to say? So we'll say less than or equal to 6. And then if that is not true, so if that is a false one, we'll still say less than 6. Oh, and don't forget your brackets. So close it off. So now what we can do is again, double click on this corner and we get a more accurate picture because that tells us that with that condition, it's going to be less than or equal to 6. Oh, that one should be greater than. Greater than 6. There we go. So this works pretty much infinitely. You can do if and or and so on and nest them as you like to get different conditions and different outputs. So it's pretty useful in that respect because you're able to identify these conditions. So think of it they're all pretty well linked, and they will all be used pretty consistently together. The only thing I'll draw your attention to is make sure what you're trying to say or do in that programming is what you are actually receiving. So validate your data first and make sure that what you're writing is going to be reflected in that data set. So these can be nested, if and or and so on. You can use multiple, just kind of breaking them into smaller brackets. But I did just want to highlight how that can be used for data sets and how you can use that to validate potential outliers or data that might not be accurate and so on. So if you've got huge data sets, you can say if it's greater than this value, then write to exclude it or something like that. So there's quite a lot of things you can do with the if and or statements, and they're very simple to use overall. So I definitely recommend having a play around with that a little more in particular as well. The other one here that we didn't cover is VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP is very useful for finding things within a data set. So I'll do a little mock-up again. So if I've got title 1, we'll do a little up to titles 10, and then we'll go number 1 and all the way up there. And then we'll do our little random number again here. So equal rand between 0 and 50. Down to there, put that down to there. And then I'm going to paste the values so they don't change. VLOOKUP is a way to find specific data with known information. So what do I mean by that? Say, for example, let's have a look at the formula. So if we type equal VLOOKUP, it wants a lookup value, table array, column index number, range lookup. So the first thing we need is a lookup value. So what we need is, what are we trying to find within our criteria? So in this case, let's say we want to know about number 10. So this is the name of some data set. So what I'll do is I'll put a link to this cell because this is a cell we're going to use as our lookup criteria. So this is going to reflect these numbers. So what we're saying is find whatever's in this cell, and we're going to try and find it in this table, and then it's going to give us a specific data point. So comma, and then we're going to look up a table array. So in this case, the table array is all that. And the column index number. So say we are interested in title 6. So that's column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But what we'll do is I'll put it here, another link there, because we might want to change that later. And then we're going to put a range lookup. So this is the last part of the VLOOKUP table, and this is where we can get either an approximate match or an exact match. So what do we mean by that? If we are doing an approximate match, VLOOKUP will find the first value that is resembling our input data and give that to us. So it'll sort things in ascending order, and it won't give us exactly what we want. It'll give us the closest thing to what we're after based on what comes first. So we don't usually want that, and most of the time you're almost always going to want an exact match. So we're going to put false, and then we're going to press enter, and of course we're going to have an error because we haven't put any data. So let's say we want to find out number 10, title 8. So what we'll do is type number 10, and we get value because we haven't put anything. And then it's going to be the column 9. So let's put column 9 here, and we're going to press enter. So it tells us that the value is 42. So because if we go to number 10, column 9, which is title 8, we get 42. So effectively what we're able to do is locate based on known information. So this might be ID numbers, or it might be names of people, or it might be different criteria. We can input that, and we know what we're looking for here to get a value. So for example, if I am trying to link this to, say, my research, so I work in water quality monitoring, I might put this as different locations. So Gold Coast suburbs, say. And we can put here different suburbs, Labrador, Southport, etc. So let's just use those as an example. And say I've got different water quality parameters here. So say I'm looking at pH, turbidity, nitrate. For those who don't know what this is, it is not important. Nitrite, just to give you guys more of a, I guess, a feel for the data and how it works. Okay, let's go with that. Let's use that as our data set. So what we can do now is say I've got multiple data sets, or I've got maybe multiple points for Labrador in my data set. What you can do is look up here. So let's look up data. Let's look up Southport. So we want to know Southport, and say we want to know what is the total suspended solids. So that's TSS reading for it. Why do we have a ref? That would be because we have, oh, jokes. That's because it's the column number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we know it's column 6. And then it gives us the value of 12. So we can automatically see, and normally what I'll do with these data sets is put 1, 2, 3. I'll put them above just when I'm using VLOOKUP, just so I know what the column actually represents, so I can just type it in straight away. And it can give you what your data is based on what you're looking up. So you can change this to Carrara, and it'll change it automatically. So that one now goes to 18 for column 5. This can be automated as well because you can add things called lists in Excel. So I won't go into that too much into depth today just for time, but we could actually make a thing in our data tab where we can convert our data using this data validation. We can go in here and we can actually create a list. So we could make these titles as a drop-down list that we can click on, and then we can automatically get results from that. So I won't go into that today just because it's a bit long on time, but I did want to highlight how we can use VLOOKUP for that. So we'll get onto an example now. So I will give you guys a link. So if you see in chat, there is a link now you can access. That is the data we're going to be working from today. So I'll give you guys a minute to access that. Everyone able to open that okay? Can I get a thumbs up if that's okay for you? So if you're able to get that data.
I got it. It was easy. Thank you.
Perfect. Everyone's got it, no dramas. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just copy paste that from the Word document just into my little Excel document here. And I'm just going to make it a little bit nicer. Just because I don't like things on different levels. Okay. So we've got our data here now. And we're going to do a few things with the data. So the first thing, we've got a few questions there talking about if statements, and it wants us to determine which of the following criteria are met for each student. So what we're going to do is work off here. So question 1 is asking us which students were male and taller than 175 centimeters. So what we're going to do here is equal if, and we want to know which ones are male and which are taller than 175 centimeters. So what we need is a nested AND statement because we need to know both parameters and they both must be true. So our logical is which of them are male. So we're going to go to this one has to be equal to M, because that's the first criteria, comma, and our second one is that they have to be taller than 175 centimeters. So we're going to go to height, we're going to click on that, greater than 175. Then we're going to close that. And then if that's true, we can write the student name. So I'm going to click on that, their name there. So that'll appear if that's true. But if it's false, I want it to be blank. So what I'm going to do is just put two quotation marks, because I don't want an answer if that's not true. I just want to see the students who are meeting that criteria. So that's our formula. And then I'm going to press enter. And for the first one, it's blank. So why is it blank? Because Alex is male. Cool. But Alex has a height that's less than 175 centimeters. Therefore, the overall outcome is false. I think I put this on the wrong thing as well. There we go. So what we'll do now is drag it down. And we can see that for our criteria, we only have James, Ben, Paul, and Lachlan, because they are the only ones that are taller than 175, but also male. So that's our question 1 done. So now let's do question 2. Question 2 says, which students were male or female over the age of 25 and had blue eyes? So in this case here, this is a bit of understanding your data. It's asking which are male or female. So do we need to include a criteria for that in our Excel formula? Should we put that in as a criteria in our or statement? What do we think? Assuming this is our strict criteria. So we know this is our strict criteria. We've got, yeah, no. And the reason we don't is because we only have 2 options in this case with our make-believe data. So we don't actually need to have our criteria listed, because if all of our criteria is encompassed, we don't have to put it as part of our formula. So just be wary of that. I know that in this case, it's a very specific data set, and you know, if we had more data relating to different things, it might be different. But in this case, when all of our criteria is encompassed, we don't actually need to include it. So if we had, for example, all the eye colors also mentioned, so if we said which of them had blue, hazel, brown, green eyes, then of course we don't need to put it as our criteria. So I just want you guys to get a bit of an understanding of how we use our data and how we don't necessarily need to include everything. We just need to be mindful of the data we're working with. So in this case, we need to know which students are over 25 and had blue eyes. So again, equal if and, so we need over 25. So we go to their age, has to be greater than 25, and had blue eyes. So we'll click on their eye color, has to equal blue. So remember, if we're doing numbers, we can just write the number. But if we're doing text-based things, we need to write within quotation marks. So those are our 2 criteria. And again, if it's true, we want the student's name. And if it's false, we want nothing. So blank, all the way down. So we've only got 2 students, Daniel and Lachlan, that have blue eyes and are over the age of 25. Hopefully you guys are starting to see how that works. So we'll do question 3. Which students were either in their first or second year of study? So now what we have to do is an or statement instead. So if, or, and we want first or second year of study. So here we go to year of study. So that has to be greater than or equal to, I think it's like that. I will have to check it. Oh no, it's 2 criteria. So it's greater than or equal to 1. So we want students where that is either equal to 1 or that cell is equal to 2. Because we want to know which are in their first or second year of study. And the value of true, nothing changes. Value of false, nothing changes. So now let's have a look. And we've got a few more students. So anyone who's in their third, fourth year of study will not be included. So let's do question I. So we'll do the last question just in terms of time. And then we'll come back to do the rest of them if we can afterwards, because I do want to get onto the VLOOKUP stuff, just so you guys get an understanding of how that works with an actual data set. So for question I, it says there's one student who is over 30, had a GPA above 5, a height over 180 centimeters, and worked while studying. So we need to figure out who is that student. So we'll start here, and let's go through it. So we've got a student. The first criteria is over 30. So let's go to their age. Has to be greater than 30. Sorry, needs to nest with an and. So their age is over 30. The next criteria is GPA is above 5. Next criteria we have is a height over 180 centimeters. So let's go height greater than 180. And they worked while studying. So this one has to equal yes. And again, if it's true, we want to know their name. If it's false, we don't care. So there's only one student that meets this criteria. So if we go down, we can find it's our actual last one. So Lachlan is, as we see here, over 30 because he's 36. He has a GPA of above 5. He's a height over 180 centimeters, and he was also working while studying. So we have our one answer. So therefore, we can find very specifically what is our criteria for that. So you can nest if and or statements within each other. Hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of how they work. I will leave the rest of the questions for now, just in case for time, just to get onto the VLOOKUP stuff. And then if we have time, we'll get back to doing the rest of them. So the second part of that question says, using VLOOKUP, obtain the following data. Now, what I'm going to do here firstly is number all my columns. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to start answering what the question wants. So here we will call it, we'll write student name. And then here we're going to put column. Now, I'll let you know, in this case here, we're just going to use the numbers of the columns. You can use, VLOOKUP as a nested formula to actually write the column number and as a name. And what I mean by that is we could say there is a way using VLOOKUP to write hair color here, for example, rather than the column number. And then it'll translate that into the column number when we do the VLOOKUP. And then you can just find what you're looking for based on that. So I won't go through it because it requires a few nestings, but that's why previously I tried to write hair color and it came up with an error because we need the column numbers primarily. But you can do that so it's a little bit, I guess, more user-friendly. So column numbers, what we're after here. And I'll just highlight those because those are our field columns. And this is where we're going to use our VLOOKUP. So VLOOKUP is always going to be the student name we're looking for. And we're going to do the table array is this. Our column index number is going to be that. And we're always going to want false because we want exact matches. So obviously error first. And as I was mentioning, as you get more proficient, you can actually create lists. So you'd be able to click a drop-down list that will give you student names rather than having to type them manually. Because for example, if I type, let's say this is column 4, and say I type here James, but I spell it wrong, it does nothing. So that's why it's useful having the list, because the list will automatically take data from there. So let's recap quickly. We're looking for this student name in our table. And then when we find them, so it'll look where is their name. It'll find the student name. And then it'll look at the column number we're interested in, so to attain whichever data, and it'll pinpoint it. So it kind of plays like a bit of a matching kind of game with it there. So the first thing we want is Kaylee's GPA. So we'll put Kaylee, and we want her GPA. So that's column 6. He has a GPA of 6.87. So Kaylee, GPA, 6.87. Now, next one we have is Ben's eye color. So let's go Ben. And his eye color is column 8, brown. So let's find Ben, eye color brown. So particularly with larger data sets, this is so much easier than having to do what I'm doing and showing you the little look, particularly if we've got multiple categories. So if we had the names repeating multiple times. Next one we have is Lachlan's height. So Lachlan, height is in column 9, 185. Then we go to Daniel's year of study. Again, Daniel, year of study is 4. He's in his 3rd year. So you can see it makes it very easy to identify information just by putting names and the column number in, because we already have that formula set up. I was a touch late, sorry. Can you run through the arguments for VLOOKUP? Yep, no worries. So that's, we will have a recording out for it, but we do have a bit of time. So I will quickly recap it, and it's good for anyone who won't understand or doesn't quite get it. So yeah, VLOOKUP, what we're trying to do is identify information based on known data. So VLOOKUP, the lookup value is information we know. So for example, we know that there's a student named Daniel, and we want to find it. Then the table array is all the data we're considering, including the known information we're trying to find. The column index number is the number of the column where we want to find our data in. So that's why we're clicking that. And then our range lookup is always, well, usually it's going to be false, because we almost always want an exact match. So we want an exact pinpointing of the data rather than an approximate match. And then just enter. So hopefully that makes sense. We will give out a recording where I did go into it in a bit more depth, Corey, but hopefully that quick little guide gives it to you. Perfect. So let's keep going and just answering the rest of them. So we've got Alex's hair color. So we want Alex. His hair color is blonde. Up. You can see that I keep doing the name. So 7 gives us blonde. Next one we have is James's age. So age is column 3. So he's 18. And you can see we're getting data from kind of everywhere. And all we're doing is putting names. So Georgia's hair color. So Georgia, and her hair color is in column 7. So brown. Georgia. And the next one we've got is Jackson's gender. Jackson. Then it's in column 2. So he's a male. Paul's discipline of engineering. Paul, column 5. He's in civil. Paul, civil. Sam's GPA. So Sam, GPA is column 6. And you can see it's very easy to run through everything. Emily's gender. Emily, and 2. Female. And just to note, just be sure, because sometimes I see some people get errors in how their VLOOKUP is structured. When you write the formula, some people might think that because normally the information you will have on that first column. Make sure your table array includes that, and that when you're doing column numbers, that is your first column. It doesn't, just because we know that, it doesn't start on the second one. It's the first one is where that known information is. So that's just one thing to be wary of. So to confirm, if we wanted to know all students in civil that had black hair, would we use if and rather than VLOOKUP? VLOOKUP is for one value match at a time. You can use either. It depends on, really it depends on what data you have. In this case here with this data set, I would use the if and statement, because it's very easy to find multiple data sets, whereas VLOOKUP is probably a lot better for that singular data point in this case. So it would be easier because we've got multiple points. We can just put the formula in. So we can write one formula and just drag it all the way down. So it would be a lot easier to use if and rather than VLOOKUP in that case, because VLOOKUP would be looking for specific information. But we could, however, use VLOOKUP if we wanted to reverse that sort of process, because in your case that you're talking about students in civil and have black hair, you might need to nest a few things in to get 2 points, because we only are looking with one data set we know and then giving us an output for one we don't know. So I would say, yeah, in this case, if and is probably a lot more simple and a lot more basic when we're actually trying to write the coding for it. VLOOKUP looks across a row first and then cross-references with a column. Yes, correct. Because we've got the table array, it'll look across those rows. It does work the other way, and it's not an issue as long as you keep this set to false, the range lookup false. When it's true and you get an approximate match, that's when it becomes problematic in terms of what it's trying to pick. So if it's false, then it's not too much of a problem. Okay, so we're nearly done these, so we'll just finish them off. Ella's height, Ella, whoop, and height is in column 9, so 174. And then we've got 3 more. So we've got, is George working? So George, 10. So no. 2 more, Selena's age. Selena, and age is in column 3. So she is 25. And you can hopefully start to see if we had so many more names, like if we had data sets that went far, far lower. I'm not struggling, but it's a little bit of a chore to look to find manually their names and then find the criteria to highlight it. If I had to go all the way and I had so many names to do that, you can see it's going to be very difficult. So this provides me with that information without having to care about how big my data set is. Lastly, we've got Ashley's eye color. So Ashley, and then her eye color is in 8. And it's brown. So let's find Ashley. She's got brown eyes. And that's our answers to those questions. So does anyone have any questions regarding the VLOOKUP or if and nested statements and so on? So what I will do is go back to the workshops, to the slides. So we are unfortunately pretty much out of time. So I'm glad we did go into the VLOOKUP stuff. Um, but I did want to do a quick summary. So what I've shown you here today is a relatively straightforward introduction to things like VLOOKUP and those nested if and or statements. You can do so much more with it, and really what I want to encourage is trying to use Excel for different things. So a lot of people get not really scared, but they're apprehensive about using Excel because they're not sure if they can actually do what they want. And most of the time, the answer is yes, you can. Google has some really useful, very simple, easy to follow Excel guides. And most of the time you can say what you want to do. So I want to average my data. How can I do it on Excel? You can Google that and it'll tell you exactly what formula to use and how to do it. And don't get me wrong, I've been using Excel for many years. I've been using it since I was a kid, but most of my knowledge of Excel is not really always retained in my head, and I use Google a lot to find that sort of information. So I want to make sure that you're not straying away from it because you think it's too hard or it might be difficult or impossible to solve your data set. There's always a way with it, and it's actually a very powerful tool. I definitely prefer Excel much more than I do MATLAB, for example. And there's so many resources available that I just don't want you guys to feel like you shouldn't use Excel because it's either too advanced or because you might not know how to. There's always a very simple way to do it. You just need to use those resources. I'm glad it makes you feel better. That's what we're trying to do. So yeah, today was relatively introductory. So it's probably a bit beyond what you typically would use it for, but hopefully it helped and gave you an idea of the power of Excel and what you can do. Particularly in STEM, if you are doing either a science capstone, work integrated learning, or a thesis for engineering, big data is incredibly important, and you need to understand how to process it, how to validate it, and how to use it. So really big scope to Excel, and as I mentioned, its inputs and its applications are pretty much endless. There's more than likely a way to do it with Excel. So I really want to encourage you to use that. And that last point there is very important. More and more employers are looking for graduates with a strong base level understanding of Excel. I was working at an engineering firm a couple of years ago, and a lot of my work was just optimizing the way they ran things or their programs with Excel. And that's just because they had systems in place that were very outdated and things they'd been using for many years. Um, and when I came in, I got to kind of reinvent those systems using Excel, making it clear and more efficient. So employers really like that understanding, even if it's a base level, even if it's just an introductory, you don't know what to do, but you know how to find things with Excel. So I just really wanted to emphasize that aspect for you guys. So that's pretty much it for today's session. Does anyone have any questions before we finish up there? Hopefully that was helpful. Saludos, Cesar. No worries, guys. Thanks for coming, everyone. Doug, Callista, Naomi, are you guys all good? Do you have any questions? Thanks for helping, Mackenzie.
What's the pre-lab?
All good. Girlie, you have to print the pre-lab off separately.
Why?
Oh my god, Scarlett's losing the plot.
I can hear that.
Why can't they just include it in the lab book?
Calm down, babe.
You don't have to carry extra shit.
Actually, I'm with you on that, Scarlett. I hated when we had to print off separate pre-labs.
I hate it too, but it is what it is sometimes.
Yeah, so let her complain.
Oh my fucking god. You did good. Proud of you.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Good work, Martin.
Thanks, Scarlett.
Talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.